I think there are probably about a dozen people on the planet who actually understand it.
Yeah, Tom Bearden being one,
what
right?
we have is that what the story goes, and is in the middle of the 1800s, there was a brilliant mathematician, electrical theorist, James Clerk Maxwell. And James Clerk Maxwell worked out what are today known as Maxwell's equations. And they are the basis of electrical theory in modern science. And he wrote them in the style of math, in the kind of math that was popular in his day, but which is no longer used. This was quaternion math. In the 20th century, everybody shifted to tensor math. So about 1900, Oliver Heaviside, who is distinguished for having discovered the ionosphere, and Heinrich Hertz, for whom the cycles per second is named, such as in Hertzian waves, the Hertz, kilohertz, megahertz, etc. Together, they translated James Clerk Maxwell's work from quaternion into tensor math. And according to Colonel Tom Bearden and a few others, they buggered it. They got it wrong. That they did not successfully make the translation, but theirs has been the standard translation used since. Now, according to Bearden, using there was another guy named Whittaker who developed a number of hyperdimensional theories based on Maxwell's original quaternion work and published at the turn of the century. You know, the 1904 was one of the most amazing years in science. That's when Niels Bohr won the Nobel Prize for proving that light was both a wave and a particle, and inadvertently proving that the universe seems to be conscious. If you're interested in that, check out the two-slot experiment, which seems to demonstrate that photons know what's going on.
Yeah.
So at the same year was the year that Whittaker published his hyperdimensional materials based on James Clerk Maxwell. Well, according to Bearden, the U.S. ignored Whittaker and built on Oliver Heaviside's buggered translations, and then went with Einstein. And Einstein did not understand or agree with Maxwell and Whittaker. So our whole system of how we think of as physics is based on a buggered version of James Clerk Maxwell. Well, Bearden says that the Russians around 1950, once they realized that we had technical superiority in terms of nuclear weapons, they decided to go back to the drawing boards and try to come up with something entirely new and different. And they went back to the original Maxwell quaternion and discovered that there was a whole world of physics that we simply do not get taught in Western colleges.
Yeah.
There's a whole other physics out there. And that based on that whole other physics, they developed what Whittaker described as scalar technology. And that scalar technology is the ability to use electromagnetics at great distance. And that's what Scott Stevens was saying that he could see in the sky, and what may have been used to move Hurricane Katrina around and so forth.
Ah, okay, I see. And this, of course, reminds me of some of the work of Nikola Tesla. And I've noticed that you go into some of his research. And what's the connection here between all these different topics?
Well, Tesla has a number of aspects. one, Tesla was just an incredibly fascinating, amazing person. He's probably the greatest genius of his generation. Uh, uh, and he was not only a great genius, but a scientific outsider. He did his work completely outside the mainstream of academic science, and yet the world we live in is his world.
Yeah.
Our world is powered by alternating current, AC. The 60-cycle power that comes through the walls in America that runs all the gadgets and gizmos. This world is the AC world, and yet of the 46 basic patents in AC power, Tesla holds 45 of them. Also, Tesla discovered radio. While Marconi is generally credited by the history books, it's something of a lie.
Yeah.
What Marconi did is he stole radio from Tesla. A classic piece of industrial espionage. Marconi went to Tesla, begged him to let him work in his lab. Tesla lets this kid work in his lab. He works there for about 2 years, scribbles down everything he can, and then goes and starts his own lab, and claims to have invented radio, based entirely on Tesla's work. Tesla sued him in the United States Supreme Court and won, with the U.S. Supreme Court overturning Marconi's patent and claiming, agreeing that Marconi had pirated 14 of Tesla's patents. So HAARP is a radio transmitter. It's radio.
Yeah.
That's pure Tesla.
Yeah.
There are some aspects of this that seem very Tesla-like. Tesla had this bright idea of injecting radio frequency energy into the stratosphere to make the atmosphere glow over cities so we wouldn't need streetlights. I'm sure glad he didn't do that.
Me too. And of course he was also trying to develop, as I know it, completely wireless energy. And this is there is also a connection, I guess, to the classic, supervillain theory of the mad scientist who develops a death ray and a beam weapon. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Tesla did develop a number of similar devices, but he didn't get very far with developing them. Basically, a whisper campaign was started against him that took him out, starting about 1900, 1902, 1904, right in there. Tesla had set up a lab in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and he had discovered what he believed to be standing waves, electrical standing waves around the Earth, and that he was convinced that if you injected energy into one node of the wave, you could pull it out at another. And he did pump a tremendous amount of electrical energy into the ground in Colorado Springs and drew it out 25 miles away and lit 200 of Mr. Edison's largest lamps with it at the time. The problem was that it had all kinds of side effects. When people in the town of Colorado Springs went to their tap water, went to turn on the taps, they got electric shocks. The horses got electric shocks through their iron horseshoes and bolted from their stables. In one of his experiments, he caused over 1,500 lightning strikes and blew out the power grid in 3 states.
Jeez. There we go. And it is according to the research that you've done. Is there any way? I mentioned the death ray earlier there, and is there any way that this is a possibility now with the HAARP as it currently have been built out?
Well, not that doesn't seem to be that. No.
Okay.
The way the death ray worked was basically it was a 2-stage device in which first a path of ionization is created in the atmosphere, and then a charge of electricity is sent down the ionized pathway. He experimented with it in the 1930s or in the 1920s. The French played around with it in the 1930s. The Russians picked it up and played with it in the 1950s, and the U.S. Military played around with it in the 1970s. Everybody who played around with it found that it was simply more trouble than it was worth. A lot of these advanced weapon systems, while they may sound like a really cool idea on paper, you gotta look down the road to what happens when you actually have the thing built and you have a 19-year-old conscript running the controls on the thing.
Yeah.
You have, when it actually gets into the jarhead's hands, what's going to happen then? And so a lot of wars that we had over the last century, a big piece of reason behind fighting the war was to have a test ground to test new weapon systems in.
Yeah.
In Gulf War I, we pulled out all the stops. We sent in all the toys. All kinds of bizarre, amazing, less than lethal, non-conventional electromagnetic weapon was tried. And when we went into Gulf War II, they left all the toys. They left most of the toys at home. Mm-hmm. And the reason for this is because when they tested them in the field, they found they stepped on each other. That all these electromagnetic devices scrambled each other, and that there was a problem of using them together. You could use this one, or you could use that one, but you couldn't use them both. Uh-huh. And so this has been you have a lot of problems. Have a lot of these advanced technologies is simply not flown when it was put into the hands of a soldier. Mm. Like in Somalia, they had the Stickum guns. Now the Stickum guns it looks kind of like a flamethrower. It's a stick you have in your hand with a tube that goes to a backpack. The backpack is full of chemicals that get squirted out the tube and become glue. Yeah. And it's a glue thrower. Yeah. The problem is the backpack weighs about 90 pounds, and it only holds enough stuff for continuous spray for about 45 seconds. Hmm. So you got a GI standing there in a mob, gluing the mob down. Well, that's fine as long as nobody is armed. But they found in Somalia was the most highly armed place on the planet, that you couldn't just be standing there with a glue gun gluing a mob because they're shooting back at you. Yeah. Yeah. And they promptly put the glue guns back in their cases and put them back on the ship. Yeah. They were just too damn dangerous to use. So this is what's happened to a lot of these advanced technologies, is that they sound good in the lab, but when you actually put a 19-year-old, a frightened boy, yeah, barely trained to use this thing in a real life situation, he doesn't want to use it. Yeah, exactly. He'd much rather have his M16.
Yeah. So I guess we could say, if we are to discuss more plausible uses of HAARP, that